black car was already running, idling at the curb outside the Hargrove Capitol building on a Tuesday morning, exhaust rising slow in the cold November air. The kind of car that doesn't wait for anyone. A Rolls-Royce Phantom. Midnight blue. The kind of blue that makes other blues feel embarrassed. And the man walking toward it, briefcase in one hand, phone pressed flat against his ear with the other, was not a man who waited either. Franklin Hargrove, 61 years old, founder and CEO of Hargrove Capital, one of the largest private equity firms in the Southeast, worth somewhere north of $800 million depending on the quarter. He had a profile in Forbes once that called him a man who turned nothing into something. He kept a framed copy in his lobby, not in his office, in his lobby, so everyone who walked in could see it first. He was already telling someone they were wrong when he pushed through the glass doors that morning. Didn't look up, didn't slow down. His driver, same man, 17 years, stepped out and opened the rear door without being asked. That was the routine. That was every morning. And then a girl said one word, not even loud, not even meant for him. She said, "Sir," and Franklin Hargrove stopped walking. Her name was Petra Calloway, 26 years old. She was standing maybe 10 feet from the car, not in his path, not asking for anything from him. At least not at first. She had her hand on the shoulder of an elderly woman who was sitting on the concrete steps that led up to the plaza, the ones the building's landscapers had lined with decorative stone and ornamental grass that nobody sat on. Except this woman was sitting on them, had been sitting, by the look of it, for some time. Petra was not from around there. That was clear. She was wearing her army jacket, the real one, olive drab, the one with the patch from the 75th Ranger Regiment still velcroed on the left shoulder even though she hadn't worn it in 18 months. She had a backpack over one arm and a paper coffee cup in her other hand. And she just turned the corner from the parking deck across the street when she saw the woman. She almost didn't stop. That's the part she'll tell you herself if you ask her. She was late. She had a 9 o'clock at the staffing agency 3 blocks north, one of those places that places veterans in corporate jobs, which is a sentence she'd spent the last year trying to make peace with. She had printed her resume the night before at the library on Clement Street. She was wearing the blazer her cousin had let her borrow, the dark green one, and she didn't want to wrinkle it by crouching down on a sidewalk. But the woman's hands. That's what stopped her. The woman's hands were folded in her lap, in the specific way that Petra had only ever seen in one other person, her grandmother, in the last months before the dementia took most of the recognizable parts of her, folded and still, and not quite connected to the rest of the body, like hands that had forgotten they belonged to someone. Petra stopped, set her coffee on the edge of the planter, crouched down. "Ma'am," she said, "you okay?" The woman looked up at her with eyes that were pale and present, and somewhere else all at once. "I'm waiting for William," the woman said. "He said to wait here." "Okay," Petra said. "How long have you been waiting?" The woman thought about it. "He said not long." Petra looked at her closer. The woman was maybe 80, maybe older. She was dressed neatly. Her real coat, good shoes, pearl earrings. But her hair had come loose on one side, and there was a smear of something on the sleeve of her coat that might have been breakfast. Her hands, Petra noticed now, were shaking faintly. "What's William's last name?" Petra asked. "Dunmore," the woman said. "William Dunmore, my son." Then, after a pause, like she was reading from a card, "He lives on Hargrove Plaza, the condominiums." Petra looked up. The building they were outside of was Hargrove Capital. The condominiums were 2 blocks east. She'd passed them on her way in. "I think you might be at the wrong building," Petra said gently. "The way you say something you know is going to take a moment to land." The woman looked at her hands. "He said to wait." "I know," Petra said. "I know he did. Can I sit here with you for a minute while we figure it out?" And that was when she looked up and said, "Sir," not to Franklin Hargrove, not intentionally, but to his driver, who had been standing by the open car door watching the whole thing with the expression of a man who wanted badly to help but had not been given permission. Franklin Hargrove heard it. He stopped walking. What he saw, standing there at the curb with his phone still pressed to his ear, was a young black woman in an army jacket crouched next to an elderly white woman on the steps of his building. That's what he saw first. That's what he'll admit now, that he saw, in that order, in that framing, with all the assumptions that order and framing carry. He covered the phone with his palm. "Marcus," he said to his driver. "What's going on?" Marcus, who had in fact already pulled his own cell phone out and was quietly trying to find a non-emergency number to call, said, "Woman's been sitting there a while, sir. Young lady stopped to help her." Hargrove looked at them for another second. Then he said into the phone, "I'll call you back," and he hung up. He walked over. Petra didn't look up immediately. She was focused on the woman, who had told her her name was Eustace, but everyone calls me Yuli since I was small, and was now telling Petra about William's apartment, how it had a balcony that faced west so the sunsets were something special, how she'd visited in October, and they'd had soup on that balcony. "Miss Yuli," Petra was saying, "I'm going to help you find William, okay? But I need you to stay right here with me for just another minute." "Is she lost?" Hargrove asked. Petra looked up at him, took him in. The suit, the building behind him, the driver, and the car. Understood, in the way the people who have spent years reading rooms learn to do very quickly, exactly who she was talking to. "I think so," she said. "Her son lives at the Dunmore condominiums. She may have gotten turned around." She paused. "Do you know if there's a building manager or someone in there who could help us track down a phone number?" Hargrove looked at his watch. It was 8:49 in the morning. He had a call at 9, a board meeting at 10:30, and a lunch that had been scheduled for 6 weeks. He looked at the woman on the steps. Yuli Dunmore looked back at him with those pale, somewhere-else eyes, and she said, very politely, "Good morning. I'm waiting for William." "I know," Franklin Hargrove said, and he sat down on the steps next to her, right there on the decorative stone in his $800 suit. "Tell me about William." Petra watched him do it. She'd been around enough people with power. In the army, power is its own language, rank is its own gravity. To know the difference between a man performing decency and a man actually practicing it. The performance has a quality to it, an awareness of audience, a half glance to see who's watching. Franklin Hargrove didn't glance. He just sat down. And he listened. Yuli told him about the balcony, about the soup, about how William had called her 3 times this week already, which was a lot for a Tuesday. "But he worries," she said, with a gentle pleasure in it, the way mothers say that word, worries, like it's a gift he keeps giving her. Hargrove nodded. Asked her what kind of soup. Listened to the answer. Petra had stepped back a little to make the call. Marcus had found the number for the Dunmore condominium's front desk and given it to her quietly, and she was speaking in the low, efficient voice she used when she needed information fast, without alarming anyone. Yes, she was calling about a resident, William Dunmore. It was important. No, she wasn't family, but there was a situation. The front desk put her on hold. She looked back at the steps. Franklin Hargrove was still sitting there. Yuli was telling him something that was making her laugh, a real laugh, sudden and young-sounding in a way that didn't match her age at all. This is a strange morning, Petra thought. Then the hold music cut out, and a voice said William Dunmore had left the building 40 minutes ago, headed east, toward Hargrove Capital as it happened, because his mother had called him from the lobby of a coffee shop near there and said she was going to meet him outside, and he was probably frantic right now if he hadn't found her. "Thank you," Petra said. "Can you call him and tell him she's okay? Tell him we're on the steps outside Hargrove Capital on 5th. She hung up, turned back, opened her mouth to tell them. But a man was already running across the plaza from the east, coatless, breathing hard, phone in his hand, and Yuli saw him first. "William," she said, not loud, not scared, just certain, the way you say the name of someone you've been sure about for 60 years. His name was William Dunmore, and he was 57 years old, and he had been running in dress shoes for 4 blocks, and he looked like a man who had just survived something. He crossed the plaza in 10 seconds flat and went straight to his mother and crouched in front of her and put both hands on her face and said, "Mom, Mom, I've been calling you. My phone is in my purse," Yuli said, with mild dignity. "You know I don't hear it in my purse." "Mom." "I found it," she said. "I found the building. This isn't my building." "I know that now," she said. "This young woman told me. She's been keeping me company." William Dunmore looked up at Petra. The expression on his face was the kind of expression you can't manufacture. It was the face of a man who had been picturing something terrible for 40 minutes and had been handed back the world instead. "You found her," he said. "She found her," he said. "She found me," Petra said. "I just stayed." He stood up. He shook her hand. Both hands the way people do when one hand doesn't feel like enough. He said, "Thank you 3 times. He said it to Hargrove, too, when he realized who was sitting on the steps of his own building in his very expensive suit. And Hargrove said, "I didn't do much," and meant it. Then William Dunmore helped his mother to her feet, gathered her gently, told her they were going to go have that soup now, on the balcony, and Yuli looked pleased about this. She looked at Petra as she was leaving. "You'll be all right," Yuli said. It wasn't a question. It was the specific thing, she said, in the specific way she said it, not "you'll be fine" or "take care," and Petra would think about it for a long time afterward. "You'll be all right," like she knew something. Then they left, and the plaza was quiet again, and Petra looked at her watch. 9,004. She'd missed the appointment. She sat down on the steps where Yuli had been sitting. Not because she was particularly sad about missing the appointment. She'd missed things before, she'd missed worse things before. She'd learned a long time ago that the universe has very little interest in your schedule. She sat down because her legs had a particular tiredness in them that she recognized from deployment. The tiredness that comes after a thing is over and your body has been holding itself together for it, and suddenly doesn't have to anymore. She picked up her coffee from the planter. It was cold. "You're a veteran," Hargrove said. She looked at him. He was still there, which had surprised her a little. Marcus had brought him a coffee from somewhere. There was a cart around the corner. She'd clocked it coming in, and he was holding it with both hands and looking at the patch on her shoulder. 75th Ranger, she said. 2 tours. And now you're... He hesitated. "Looking for work," she said, without embarrassment. She practiced not being embarrassed about it. She wasn't quite there yet, but she was practicing. Had an appointment at a staffing agency. Missed it. Hargrove looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "Marcus, call Denise. Tell her I need to push the 9 o'clock." Marcus, who was back at the car and who had witnessed the whole morning and the particular silence of a man who sees everything and says little, pulled out his phone. "You don't have to do that," Petra said. "I know," Hargrove said. "Come up. Get a real coffee. Tell me what kind of work you're looking for." She looked at him. "I'm not a charity case," she said. "Not defensively. Just as information." "I know that too," he said. "I watched you run that situation for 20 minutes before I even walked over. You assessed, you communicated, you got the result. That's not charity. That's a skill set." She thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. "Okay," she said. "Here is where a different kind of story would skip ahead. Fast forward. Cut to 3 months later, Petra in a corner office, or a year later at a company dinner, toasting to new beginnings. That version is neater. That version is neater. That version fits a certain shape, but this one doesn't skip. Because what actually happened next matters." What happened was they went up to Hargrove's office. She drank a real coffee. She answered his questions. What she'd done in the army. What she was good at. What she wanted. She told him, flat, that she'd been out for 18 months, and the transition had been harder than she'd expected. Not because she couldn't do the work, but because nobody had given her an honest shot at the work. That every interview she'd had, she could feel the moment the other person decided what she was before she'd finished her sentence. Hargrove didn't flinch at that. He said, "I've done that. Made decisions before the sentence was finished. I'm trying to do it less." She believed him. Not because he said it, but because of the way he'd sat down on the steps. He introduced her, that afternoon, to his head of operations. A woman named Sandra who shook Petra's hand once, sharp, and then spent 45 minutes asking her questions that were actually hard. the kind that required thought, not performance. Petra liked her immediately. She got a call back the next morning, not from a staffing agency, from Sandra directly. And here is where this story could end. Petra gets the job. Franklin Hargrove turns out to be a decent man. Yulie is safe with William on the balcony. The city goes on. But there was something else, something that came out about 6 weeks later. The way things have a tendency to come out when the stakes seem low enough for someone to finally speak. Marcus, who had been Franklin Hargrove's driver for 17 years, gave his notice the same week Petra started. He was retiring, he said, moving to be closer to his grandchildren. Both of these things were true. But on his last day, he told Petra something in the parking deck while she was walking to her car. He told her that he had watched from the car for the full 20 minutes before Hargrove ever walked over. He had wanted to help. He said this plainly, without drama. He had wanted to get out of the car and go sit with the woman on the steps and make sure she was okay. He hadn't, not because he was unkind, because, and he said this carefully, like a man who had been carrying it, because in 17 years he had learned that you don't do things outside your lane without permission. That getting out of the car without being asked was not something drivers did, that he had learned, very early in this job, to wait. Petra stood in the parking deck and listened to him say this. And when I saw you stop, Marcus said, I felt. He paused, chose the word carefully. Relieved. That someone did it, even though it should have been me. Petra thought about what to say. It was you, she said finally. You found the number. You gave it to me. You made the call happen. Marcus looked at her. From inside the car, he said. From inside the car, he said. Sometimes that's where you are, she said. It still counts. He was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. Once. The way old men nod when they've decided something is true enough to carry forward. There is a version of this morning that never happened. In that version, Petra doesn't stop. She keeps walking north toward the staffing agency, and she makes it to her 9 o'clock and shakes a hand she won't remember, and fills out a form and goes home to the apartment she shares with her cousin, and puts the blazer back on the hanger, and heats up something from the freezer and tells herself tomorrow will be different. In that version, Yulie sits on the steps for another half hour before someone calls the non-emergency line. In that version, William Dunmore finds her. She's fine. A little shaken. He takes her home. In that version, Franklin Hargrove's car pulls away at 8:49, and he makes his 9 o'clock and his 10:30 and his lunch, and doesn't think about the woman on the steps because he never saw her. In that version, Marcus retires having never told anyone what he told Petra in the parking deck. He takes it with him. It weighs what it weighs. This is not that version. There's something Petra said when someone, a woman in her cousin's book club of all things, who heard the story third hand and cornered Petra at a birthday party, asked her if she thought it meant something, that the whole morning happened the way it did, whether she thought there was a reason. Petra had her drink in her hand and was thinking about something else, and she answered the way she answers when she hasn't prepared an answer, which is usually the truest way. She said, I think Yulie was going to be okay regardless. William was already running. He would have found her. But you? I made her less afraid for 20 minutes, Petra said, while she waited. That's what I did. Made the wait less alone. She said it like it wasn't much. But anyone who has ever waited for something, afraid, knows what 20 minutes of less alone is worth. Franklin Hargrove did something in December that was not announced in a press release and was not featured in any newsletter. He worked with Sandra to formalize a veteran hiring initiative. Not a symbolic one, not a we hired 2 people and put it in the annual report one, but an actual pipeline with actual structure. Partnered with 3 transition programs, reviewed quarterly, with real benchmarks. It was Sandra's idea, technically. She had proposed it twice before. Both times it had stalled somewhere in the approval process. This time, it didn't stall. Hargrove signed it on a Wednesday. He told Sandra it was overdue, and she said she agreed, and they did not have a large conversation about why, specifically, it had been overdue before. Some things are understood better in the doing than in the explaining. Petra is, as of this telling, still there. Still working for Sandra. She found out about the initiative the way most employees find out about internal things. A company-wide email, quarterly update, 2 paragraphs down. She read it on her phone on her lunch break, sitting on a bench near a window, eating something she'd brought from home. She thought about Yuli on the steps. About hands that have forgotten they belong to someone. About how, sometimes, the thing that makes someone remember is just a voice, not loud, not meant for anyone in particular. Just a word, just a sir, said at the right moment in the right direction, that lands on someone who happens to be walking past and hasn't yet gotten into the car. That's all it takes, sometimes. That's all. And also, everything.